Welcome to my presentation. Today's presentation and lesson will be on overharvesting of the oceans. Where did all the fish go? In this presentation, we're going to look at two coastal regions. One, our own Atlantic seaboard, and we're also going to look at the Baja coast of Mexico, our neighbors to the south. And we're going to see two distinctly different ecosystems that have been devastated by overfishing. You have people whose livelihoods have been affected. You've also got fish themselves, stock numbers, species that have been affected by this. So let's start. First, we're going to look at what is overharvesting. Overharvesting. It's the action of taking more than what is needed and more than what can be reproduced from the ocean to sustain the population. Overfishing is not a new concept. Thinking about it, fishing is one of the very first things that we as humans as a civilization were able to do. From the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Romans, all throughout the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, and even to present day. Fishing has been something that has been a staple of not only the economy, but people's diets. We look at overfishing and we have to realize that, for the last half century, we've done a lot really to understand that we have overfished. And it's become a global community that's come together to say, hey, we need to do something to stop us from depleting what's left in the ocean. We realized that we were causing an issue that needed to be addressed. When you look at fishing, you have to, like I said, you have to look at the longevity of just the economy of fishing. Fishing is mentioned in the Bible. Fishing was the way of life for many and still is for many throughout the world, not just here in the US. I want you to look at this chart and I want you to understand the severity of the issue at hand. This is a chart of the east coast of Newfoundland along the Atlantic seaboard. And if you don't know where Newfoundland is, it's part of Canada, just north of Maine. And you're going to look at the height of fishing within our area. It was reached really in the 1960s, and you can see the tonnage that was being taken. But then you're going to look down towards the mid-70s, and you're going to see this drastic decline. And then you're going to see where we're at in 1992. And you're going to say, whoa, what is going on here? Well, this representation is a little misleading. Were all the fish gone? No, they weren't all gone. But there was quite a bit less fish to catch. But this chart shows what happened in the mid-70s and then also in the 90s, you will see here. So what are we doing about it? Well, the United States has taken measures to address the issue of overfishing by passing legislation to not only identify the problem at hand, but also help control it and maintain it and regulate it. First, in 1976, we had the Magnuson-Stevens Fishery Conservation and Management Act. This legislation set up catch limits like we have today, but also, more importantly, set up coastal waters along our coastline as exclusive economic zones. This thus prevented foreign fishing boats access to our fisheries. Well, it did have success. The success was that it was able to keep outside foreign fishing vessels from harvesting our fish. You notice I put a picture of the Coast Guard. When most people think of the Coast Guard, they think of drug interdiction, getting the drugs off the boats coming in from down south, or they think of people being rescued by the Coast Guard. But in all actuality, the Coast Guard's largest operation for many years was actually fish management and managing the fisheries. They would board vessels and check stocks, that fishermen took. They would check the measurements of the fish. They'd check the quantity of the fish. So the Coast Guard really played an integral role in helping with our overfishing issue. Well, just like anything, there are failures. And one of them is that we didn't do enough to stop ourselves from overfishing our waters. And more importantly, we didn't help the fish in replenishing their own stocks. We just overfished and we didn't give them time to rebreed. give us more fish. And one of the other points I want you to understand is there's a lot of bycatch. What I mean by bycatch is you see the picture here, you see the shark caught in a fish net. Well, that fish net was not intended to catch the shark. That fish net was intended to catch other fish. And what happens is these boats would come across and they would drop their fish nets in the water and they would catch whatever there. It's called trolling. And the byproduct of what they're trying to catch is now called the bycatch. So what's next? Well, Congress again looked at the issue and said, hey, we need to do better. We need to come up with a better solution. So they came up with something called the Sustainable Fisheries Act of 1996. They addressed the management issues from before, from the overfishing and restocking, the fact that we ourselves need to do more to protect, not just keep foreign entities away. They did a very smart thing, in my opinion. They incentivized fishing farms to help alleviate the pressure off wild fish to reproduce at fast rates, thus giving the wild fish time to reproduce at their rate. Now, these fishing farms are not just farms out in the middle of like the Midwest. No, they're in the ocean. They're protected, but they're farms that are used just for fishing. The success of this, as you can see in this chart, is pretty large. You know, you look at the years and you see when these fishing farms were implemented, and you can see the numbers of the fishing farms has really gone through the roof. And actually, what's more impressive is the wild capture here. That's the wild fish that we've been trying to help them in reproducing themselves. And you look at that incline, you know, that's not as steep. I'll give you that, but it's not as steep, but it's a steady rise. And that is great to look at. That is a great sustainable effort on our part. But it did come with some failures. We were only protecting certain species. Thus, we helped sustain their levels, but in doing so, we allowed other species to be overfished, which have caused harm to their numbers. And a lot of that had to do with the big business. And, you know, fishermen make a living. They got to catch fish. So another failure was big business tied up the legislation of this act in courts to help prevent some of the implementation of the laws, such things as catch limits, such things as how much and how long the seasons would be, things like that, that the fishermen would bellyache over, but needed to be done for the bigger picture. I want to take the next few minutes to really talk about success worldwide. And I stated earlier, you know, Mexico, our partners to the south, they have a they have done a great job in a certain area. They really have. And I'm going to introduce you to that area now. It is called Cabo Palmo, Mexico. It's just north of Cabo San Lucas along the Baja in the Sea of Cortez. It has a very rich history. It's an old fishing village. With that, what I mean is there's generations upon generations of men and women who have been fishermen their whole lives and using the fishing economy to sustain their livelihood and sustain themselves. Well, over time, the fishermen were returning to the port with less fish. And with that, the fragile economy of a small fishing village was on the verge of collapsing, sadly. And these people had to make a decision. And they decided that a decision had to be made for their survival. Now, this was also a government decision, but it was a local one just as much. So what did they do? They gave up fishing in mass. You know, these people had to realize, hey, if we want to still live here, we got to give up fishing, but we've got to do something. So what they do, they turned to tourism. It was a very big gamble, but you know, they were willing and they had to really do something. So now through the conservation, it's now a national park, so you can't do any fishing anymore there. But you can now go scuba diving. You can do a lot of things. But what's more important is what you're going to see has happened is because of the mindset and the correct decision that the local villagers made, there's a large fish ecosystem that has reemerged. So plentiful that now there's actually talk that they are going to do some fishing, but it's going to be highly regulated. This is Cabo Palmo before. This is when they're realizing that things needed to change. You know, you're not looking at fish in this picture. It's very desolate. Um, Very sad to see that. But I don't want to leave you with something sad, so I'm going to give you something very happy to look at. This is it now. If you were to go there, you'd be amazed at the fishing that, or the fish that are there, but you'll be more amazed at just the whole ecosystem. It's amazing to see what's come back. Not only are the local fish that were there before when they were fishing have returned, but now they're getting different species of fish. They're also getting predatory fish, so things like sharks and whales. They're getting a lot of seals that they didn't have before. So what they're getting is a whole new ecosystem because they decided that overfishing has caused so much damage in their community that they had to do something, and they decided to look towards sustainability and conservation as a way to help replenish the fishing stock. I'd like to thank you for paying attention and enjoying this slide.